Released in 2005, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness was the second in the short-lived line of Pokemon games for the Nintendo GameCube, and in my opinion, it's the best Pokemon game of all time, or at least that's what I've been saying. In truth, I haven't taken the time to fully sit down and enjoy this game on a solo adventure in well over a decade. Despite that, I've maintained the position over the years that this is the best Pokemon game ever made, and represents the end of an era, along with a decline in not just the Pokemon Company and their products, but also my interest in the series. I still play each game when they release to some degree, and have logged hours on every main game in the series, but to this day, nothing beats Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. I decided it was finally time to put my claims to the test, and dust off this game to play through it in its entirety. This video serves as a retrospective of XD and an analysis of my experience. I want to answer a few simple questions. Is this game as good as I remember? Does it still hold up today? And is it worth playing for someone like you who may have been a fan of the series but never experienced it at release or has last played it at release? So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the supposed greatest Pokemon game of all time, at least according to me. It may seem strange to start with sales, reception, and development before we jump into the game, but for this case in particular, I think it serves an excellent purpose in giving us context to XD and its release. In the late 90s and beginning of the 2000s, the idea of a home console Pokemon experience was unfathomable. These were handheld games designed to be played on the go, but with a series success, eventually it only made sense to put time into developing a AAA experience. This is exactly what Nintendo and Pokemon Company did by creating the group Genius Sonority. This new development group was tasked specifically with developing a home console Pokemon game, and what they came up with was the fresh title Pokemon Colosseum. Released in 2003 in Japan and mid-2004 to the rest of the world, this game was a far cry from the simple handhelds players were familiar with at the time. It centered around a trainer with the default name Wes, and was controlled from the third-person perspective with everything in glorious 3D. Now 3D Pokemon was not unheard of at the time, with Stadium 1 and 2 coming out for the Nintendo 64 years prior. But this was to be a true Pokemon experience, with all the battling and catching players were accustomed to, right? Well, sort of. It was quite apparent that this game had some major differences from anything before it. Highlights, just to name a few, include no gym challenges, no wild encounters, the concept of shadow Pokemon, we'll dive more into this later, stealing said shadow Pokemon from other trainers, not choosing a starter, and instead starting with 2 Pokemon, because in this game, every battle was a double battle. Even with all these changes, the game on most fronts was a success, with solid if not mixed scores from outlets like Metacritic giving a 73 out of 100 and IGN giving a 7.5 out of 10. Colosseum is the best-selling RPG on the GameCube, for God's sake, so obviously a sequel was in order. And thus, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness was born, expanding on the original and continuing the story along. The strange part though is after XD there was no more, other than Pokemon Battle Revolution for the Wii, which touted zero story mode and was more akin to a stripped down stadium. There would be no full home console Pokemon game until the Switch, with Pokemon Sword and Shield in late 2019. That was it. No more Shadow Pokemon, nothing. Still to this day, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness stands as the last of its kind, and in my opinion, will stay the last of its kind for the rest of time. So with that context, let's jump into this so-called perfect game. Right off the bat, we're greeted to the most ominous title music of any game I've played in a while. I actually remember being scared of the Lugia as a kid and trying to race through the main menu to get as little audio as possible. At the character select screen, we make our main man Jung and get this decent looking cutscene to set up the plot. When we boot into the game, we're instantly thrown into a battle between two of the most powerful Pokemon from this generation, and it becomes obvious quite early this game takes a different approach to showing you the ropes than most modern Pokemon titles. The battle is an interesting way to show off not very effective and super effective moves by letting the player try out some different ones in this sim to see what works. We, however, smoke the tutorial because I know my type charts and leave this battle sim to find out we're in a lab. I'll spare you the details here because the start of the story is a bit slow. Basically, our mom works with this guy, Professor Crane, who just finished building a Snag machine that lets us capture and take back shadow Pokemon in case they ever return, a reference to Pokemon Colosseum. Professor Crane is also attempting to build, but is not finished with, a Purification chamber that allows us to purify shadow Pokemon super efficiently. We'll dive into shadow Pokemon and Purification a bit later. Our mom asks if we can run to Dr. Kaminko's lab to find Jovi, our younger sister. When we arrive, we're put in our first battle against Kaminko's assistant, Shobin, who mistakes us for a burglar because he's pretty much blind. Amazingly, the Pokemon we send out, our starter, is a beautiful Eevee. This, in my mind, is the best starter Pokemon of any game in the series. Main reason being, we can evolve this guy into any of the 6 forms that existed when this game came out super early on. That level of customization in a starter is highly appreciated, as we're not pigeonholed into playing with a certain type and have tons of flexibility in what we want from our starting Pokemon. Just a side note, the writing in this game is already starting to shine. Shobin's basically blind as a bat, which is why he attacks us, and hearing him describe the doctor's horrible inventions actually had me laughing. So we meet up with Jovi, talk to the doctor, and make our way back to the lab, where things aren't going great. Before everything does go haywire though, Crane actually gifts us the Snag machine, which is huge because this is right before everything gets crazy. But the Snag machine will now allow us to catch opponent's shadow Pokemon in battle, which is super sweet. After being gifted the Snag machine, the player is alerted that there's a massive commotion going on outside the lab. A mysterious group of villains are in the process of capturing Dr. Crane, and we enter into our first true battle with one of the grunts. This peon, love that name by the way, sends out the first shadow Pokemon we've seen thus far, a shadow Teddy Ursa. With Crane in the background, we throw our Pokeball at this bear and capture our first shadow. Unfortunately for us though, and more specifically for Crane if I'm honest, these grunts don't care, and load his ass into the back of their Tesla Cybertruck, skirting off into the distance. I believe it's explained somewhere, but my assumption through playing the game was that these goons want Crane to build them a bunch of Snag machines so they can capture all the Pokemon they want and turn them into shadows. Pretty cool setup to the plot, and actually makes sense. They want more power without having to care for, train, and raise Pokemon. We cut back to everyone in the lab, understandably saddened by Kane being straight up kidnapped, but our mom gives an inspiring speech about finishing work on the Purification Chamber. She tasks us with heading to Gateon Port to pick up a part for the Purification Chamber. So off we go on the next step of our adventure. Arriving in Gateon, we are greeted by the absolute Chad Zook, who threatens to kick the shit out of Jovi, an 8-year-old girl just because she bumped into him. I love Zook. If there's anyone who seems like they want a shadow Pokemon, it would be Zook. Also Zangoose rules. Thankfully, Mr. Varric, a Yoda-esque old man with apparently massive wealth, and his 2 bodyguards show up to save us. Surely these ominous men won't turn out to be evil later on. Regardless, one of the bodyguards straight up one-shots Zook's Zangoose, and he scurries off like a big baby. This guy, Ardos, that's the name of the guard, has a level 44 Alakazam. So far, we've had 2 entire battles in this game. These guys are definitely way above our pay grade. With all that sorted out, we are now free to explore Gateon Port and grab that part. Something to note, Gateon has a mart and a Pokemon Center, which will be a common theme among the rest of the towns we visit. While we run around, I want to cover a few things I've noticed so far. Firstly, this game's soundtrack fucking rules. Every single song has been a banger. Second, some of the gameplay elements definitely feel outdated. Things like text boxes for characters speaking feel antiquated compared to modern video games. That's not even to mention the graphics, which definitely show some age. But in comparison to modern day Pokemon, I would argue not much has changed. There's still no voice acting, still text boxes for speech, and in my opinion, a lot of the models for Pokemon actually look better in XD, with more life and personality compared to the contemporary titles. The narrative-driven gameplay and location system do a lot to safeguard this game from feeling too outdated to enjoy. Back to Gateon, we find some items exploring. Of note is a sailor in the parts shop who gives us any of the evolution stones we would need for our Eevee. I chose the Sun Shard for getting an Espeon in the future, and we encounter our next 2 Shadow Pokemon, which I believe to be the only 2 Shadows that appear in optional battles for the rest of the game. After our exploring and heading to the parts shop, we get what we need and can peace out back to the lab to deliver the goods. Our mom mentions here that we can try and learn more about Purification from a place called Agate Village, pretty much the retirement home of the Ore region. For us though, there's a relic stone which we can use to purify our shadow types the old-fashioned way. As we head to Agate, one of my favorite locations in the game, it seems like a good time to bring up how shadow Pokemon and purifications work in a little bit more detail, as they're the biggest differentiator of this game. So a shadow Pokemon is literally just a normal ass Pokemon, but their heart has been closed, whatever that means. In terms of gameplay, this translates to shadow Pokemon don't level up, but they have access to a variety of shadow type moves that are very powerful and actually super effective on every Pokemon that isn't also a shadow type. We can purify them by lowering their heart meter, which drops when we walk with them in our party and use them in battle. Once purified, these Pokemon will be able to level up normally and regain their normal moves. Pretty sweet system, honestly. It makes designing a team much more interesting, choosing to use more shadow Pokemon to purify them quickly, or sticking with the main team to level them up and develop their moves. This dynamic is a key way Pokemon XD sets itself apart from the other games. The consequence of this system though is a much more limited pool of Pokemon to use compared to other titles. On top of this, there are very few random encounters when looking at what players might be accustomed to. So far in the game, this seems like a boon for team building, forming deeper bonds with your Pokemon you would otherwise never use and forcing the player to get creative. Also, of a similar vein, I want to discuss the idea of every battle being a double battle along with the battle style of set. This just means we can't switch for free when our opponent sends in a new Pokemon. I know it's early on in our adventure, but so far I felt these 2 differences are driving factors in why I'm having so much fun. Personally, I've played a good bit of VGC online and appreciate the complexity and layers double battles provide Pokemon. The cherry on top here is the forced battle style of set, meaningfully adding difficulty in a way that enhances strategy and gameplay. While the game has been a cakewalk so far, it's still early, and I'm interested to see if that changes go forward. So Agate is a beautiful city. Serene nature and calming music really sell the mood here. In the town, there are a few things of note. First off, our Eevee evolves into a beautiful Espeon, who I named Pharaoh. It feels like a ROM hack having an Espeon at level 12, but I honestly can't complain. We also trunch every single elderly person here in Pokemon battles, allowing us to drop the heart meter of Teddy Ursa to 0. So we meet up with Aegon, who our mom directed us to for purification matters, and he goes on about battles he set up for us to get to the Purification Stone. I love Aegon. He's a master trainer in his past and is extremely wise in the game. So as he suggests, we battle through the gauntlet provided, eventually making it to the Relic Stone. After a battle with Aegon himself, we can purify both of our first Pokemon. When we purify these boys, they get experience points they would have earned while being shadow Pokemon. A neat touch rewarding you for purifying them through battle. Also, we finally have their full non-shadow movesets back, and these movesets are wild. Poochyena came with Poison Fang and Dig, which definitely would not be happening in a mainline game, and Teddiursa has Refresh, another strange move we'll see on many of the Pokemon we purify. This trend of strange moves continues and again helps vary the experience when compared to your typical game, providing more strategic gameplay for battling. So after finishing our time in Agate Village, I decided this next session I wasn't going to hit record, and for the next 2 hours didn't realize I wasn't recording any footage. I concluded the best way to remedy this was to go back through the game on a new save after the original playthrough was complete, so we could get this footage and make it as close to the original experience as possible. Agan informs us that his friend Vander over at Mount Battle may have some more information on Cipher, the evil group that kidnapped Dr. Crane, and talking to him might shed some detail on where Crane is being held. So we get back on our scooter and head to Mount Battle, and let me tell you, this place is insane. It's literally an active volcano with a coliseum built on the top crater. Upon entering, we're greeted by Eldis, the other of Mr. Varric's bodyguards we met back at Gateon. He begins to ask us questions on ethics of battling and what's cruel towards Pokemon, and I find it super ironic the place he chooses to do this is literally called Mount Battle, but I digress. Stepping inside the building, a lady alerts us that Vander is actually out training rookies right now. Heading through the door behind her, we step onto a platform labeled Number 1 and are challenged to battle the trainer there. While we get through these battles to visit Vander, I want to go over Mount Battle because there's a ton of stuff to do here. Firstly, in the lobby, there's a move tutor and a move deleter. The deleter allows us to unlearn moves we no longer want, but without HMs in this game, I really don't see the purpose. The move tutor, however, is great. For some of the currency Poké coupons we can gain through battling, we can have our team relearn any of the moves that they missed while leveling. This is especially useful later in the game when we're snagging shadow Pokemon that are at really high levels. There's also a shop in the lobby, which again, for the exchange of Poké coupons, we can get many different items, all of which I would consider powerful for competitive battling. The fields of this area does have an air of competition to it. We haven't seen that thus far in XD, and to top it all off, we can discuss the meat and potatoes, the 100 battle challenge. The Coliseum serves as a core piece of the story in the appropriately named Pokemon Coliseum, but only these battles to Vander are required in Gale of Darkness. The mountain is split into 10 areas, each with increasing difficulty and rewards to be gained for completion. Pokemon's levels here range from level 9 in Zone 1 to level 70 in Zone 99. So for this effort, completing the 100 battle challenge must hail some awesome loot, right? Well, in my opinion, yes, the rewards are awesome, but probably not worth your time these days. If you one-shot Mount Battle, meaning you get through all 100 zones without leaving, which is insane, the reward is the Earth Ribbon, which will be given to each of your Pokemon that helped out. This is a really cool flex to be sure, but the real reward can be gained by just getting past all 100 zones without having to do it in one go. That being said, you cannot make any adjustments to your team or visit the PC during your run. The team must remain the same for all 100 battles. The reward for this one is one of the 3 Johto starters, Chikorita, Cyndaquil, or Totodile, each coming with their own special egg move and their type's variation of Hyper Beam, being Frenzy Plant, Blast Burn, and Hydro Cannon. You can obtain all 3, but you have to go through the mountain 3 times, which is tons of battling, and way too much in my opinion. Now back in the day, it would have ruled to get these guys, trading them to my copy of Ruby and owning all of my friends with a Pokemon they don't have using a move they don't know. But today, it just doesn't feel worth the time investment. It's still an awesome feature and a great way to get more content pushing those who want a challenge, but that being said, I don't think it's worth it. So with that long-winded explanation of Mount Battle out of the way, we can return to our story. Beating down on a couple rookies, Vander eventually tells us that he knows of an abandoned Cipher lab not too far away. This is it, our first dungeon. Before we head there though, we get an email from Aiden letting us know that Pokeballs are for sale in Agate, and I have a hunch we're definitely going to need them. Right now the team consists of 4 Pokemon, and I'm hoping we can snag some new players in the next location. So we say goodbye to Vander, stock up at Agate, and head over to the Cipher lab, where we can instantly see the truck used to kidnap Crane. Nice touch. Along with that, there's 6 of the goofiest enemies in a Pokemon game ever, the Hexagon Brothers. These Walmart looking Power Rangers have trouble even counting to the number 6, but I have to admit they are pretty hilarious. So each of them is a different color, signifying their favorite type, and unfortunately we can't get inside the lab without taking each of them out. Going into battle, they actually surprised me for a few reasons. For one, the game plays around with the number of Pokemon each of them carries, ranging from 2 to 5, and all at different levels. I think this help keeps each battle a lot more fresh. Beyond that, each holds a Shadow Pokemon at level 17 plus, which is super high compared to what we've been seeing. So as we work through knocking out these goons, let's talk through the last mechanic of Shadows I've yet to mention, and that would be Reverse Mode. This mode works pretty simply. Any Pokemon may enter this mode after using a Shadow type move. When in Reverse Mode, they deal a small bit of damage to themselves at the end of turn. They also may disobey when asked to use a move that isn't a Shadow type. To get them back to normal, we simply use the Call feature, which takes up their turn to attack, but lowers their heart meter and brings them back to normal. This feature is actually a blessing, making it easier to open the hearts of your Pokemon, but in a pinch, it can be devastating by having a Pokemon disobey you when you needed it to use a super effective move in a really close battle. So after these battles, we net 6 Shadow Pokemon from the Hexagon Brothers and can enter the lab. As we enter the facility, the first thing that jumps out to me is the incredible music. The soundtrack of this game has been a 10 out of 10 thus far. We're soon ambushed by a peon flying in from the ceiling, which scared me the first time. And this is how a lot of the battles will go. I think this is awesome. Not knowing where enemies are makes for an interesting decision of pushing further with a wounded team or playing it safe and going back to heal. We move deeper into the facility and it becomes obvious this place is anything but abandoned. Scientists are working, machines whirring, and there's full teams of grunts all over. This place is a lot of battling. Normally I would get fatigued with this many encounters and start to get bored, but the allure of Shadows to Snag kept me engaged, as they're sprinkled throughout the whole facility. Midway through, we overhear Crane speaking to Naps, the guy whose Teddy Ursa we snagged earlier at the HQ, and we see Lavrina, the apparent boss of the zone. As we continue on, we come to learn the plan of Cipher is to create the ultimate Shadow Pokemon that can never be purified. They want Crane to assist them in this goal, hence the kidnapping incident. We also learn the head of Cipher's name is Master Greville, which may be quite possibly the shittiest villain name I've ever heard. Traveling through, I quickly realize a lot of the optional chests sprinkled throughout the lab almost feel like bait. Optional encounters rarely hold Shadow Pokemon, so it feels bad to waste my time fighting and wounding my team to be rewarded with an Ether or like 1 Super Potion. Another realization is the dynamic between purifying and leveling. I want to do both, but it's really just not possible. My strategy by the end was 1 Shadow, 1 Pure in the front to be able to effectively hit both types in battle. When it came down to fights of Shadow vs Shadow, I really couldn't do much that wouldn't risk them fainting and missing the snag. The battles were generally pretty quick though, and after some time we come across Crane, who is being kept in his chambers by Naps. Naps obviously isn't too happy to see us and challenges us to a battle. Fight wasn't too bad, but he did put a dent into my team, and it's a nice touch that he no longer uses a Shadow Pokemon because we literally stole his. The toughest part of the area I actually avoided on accident, but a difficulty spike is noticeable even if small. After defeating Naps, Crane decides we should make a run for it, which is exactly the opposite of what I decided to do. Instead, I chose to loop back around and explore some of the areas I missed, which led me to a heal machine. And after getting my fill, we head to the exit where Lavrina comes down, not happy to see us. She literally speaks like a bratty teen, and for a villain did a fantastic job of making me hate her. So she challenges us to a battle, and thank the Lord I went and healed up, because if we didn't and went in right after the fight with Naps, there's barely a chance we make it through. Her team is tough, helmed by her ace, a level 20 plus Delcatty. Using Shadow Rush, a 55 power move, it plows through purified Pokemon you may be using up to this point. Thankfully we can stall out the cat by using 2 shadows up top and throw ball after ball until we catch it. That really is one flaw of these battles though. Opponents' shadow Pokemon will never use normal moves, they simply don't know them. So only using shadow moves means they do no damage to you if you're using shadow Pokemon yourself. That kind of made the end of the battle feel pretty one-dimensional, and it feels in a way like as long as you make it past their purified Pokemon, the shadows are free as long as you have a shadow Pokemon of your own. Lavrina talks a little shit after we beat her and dips out because we won, and while she does that, her silly little assistant drops a data ROM, which we give to Crane. Hoping to decrypt it and learn of their plans, we head back to the HQ while Crane catches the gang up on what we learned. As he's speaking, someone bolts in and exclaims, "The Purification Chamber is complete." And in one word, the Purification Chamber rules. And so does the music. This new invention allows us to purify Pokemon at the HQ passively while we go about our adventure. The way we accomplish this is through building sets, or groups of 4 Pokemon that sit in the chamber with one shadow to help purify it. The more Pokemon with super effective types towards each other, the faster the shadow is purified. Pretty interesting way to use the type chart. This system is an incredible way to combat 2 major issues. 1. A party can only be 6 Pokemon, and we would forever have to cycle our team to have any chance of purifying everything we catch. With the chamber, we can purify exactly 9 extra Pokemon passively, which felt like a good number throughout our adventure. 2. While snagging Pokemon is great, if all they're going to do is sit in our box for the rest of the game, why not just make the fights easier and knock them out? Well, now we have a real reason to capture everyone we find to build out more effective sets and purify the Pokemon we do want to use even quicker. Overall, this is an awesome inclusion, and I think the Purification Chamber is a core piece of what makes the Shadow system work at a fundamental level. When we exit our chamber time, Crane tells us to go find Gaton, who's been trying to decrypt the ROM we found. Gaton is super sad and can be found crying outside the lab because he's too stupid to hack the ROM. Crane comes out and consoles the big baby though and lets us know his buddy Net at ONBS News Headquarters is a master, and we can find him over at Pyrite Town. I will now pass it back to the me who remembered to hit record, and we resume our original run in Pyrite. We arrive in the slums of the Ore region, Pyrite Town, to the commotion of a camera woman running off to a spot where they found wild Pokemon. As we continue to explore, we'll learn that wild Pokemon were actually not native to the region. Recently, thanks to the effort of Pyrite's mayor Duking, we can learn to catch them at specific Poké spots. For now though, let's continue toward the ONBS building and deliver the data ROM. Pyrite, while incredibly charming, doesn't have all that much for us to do. In memory, it was one of my favorite locations in the game, and I think that was for a few reasons we'll see later. But upon our first entrance, there's not much other than the introduction of Trudley and Foley, who if you played Colosseum may seem familiar. We can go around and explore the jail, hotel, and grab some items, but the main content waiting for us is in Duel Square and the Colosseum. They're both different areas to battle, Duel Square just being a group of people who want to take you on in the street, and the Colosseum a more formal challenge. We can take this on at any time if we want some sweet loot, but in the end, it's entirely optional. I'm sure by obvious it's now, I'm starting to skip some battles. I think it's just how I like to play the game, very quest and mission driven. Also, difficulty hasn't been a big issue, so I'm fine for the moment. The nice part is what I'm skipping is all, again, entirely optional, and I could come back and complete it if need be. The reward definitely adds value, but just hasn't been enough to sway me yet. Returning to the story, we arrive at ONBS, run up the building, help a little girl find her mom, chat it up with some NPCs, and at the top, meet Net to give him the ROM. While trying to decrypt it, he suggests we visit Duking at one of the Pokespots where these wild Pokemon show up in Ore. So we head on over to the Pokespot and get roped into the show being filmed, getting a free sample of snacks we need to catch these Pokemon. Duking gives us access to the Oasis spot where we can find him again, and shows us the final Rock Pokespot, along with offering a few trades he'll do for catching the rare spawn in each of these areas. I want to stop for a second and go off on this system. I think the idea is awesome. random encounters being added as optional content to explore is great, but the implementation is terrible. The way the system works is you put down a set number of Poké snacks at a spot, and then after a random amount of time, a Pokemon will appear and start eating them. This will send an alert to the player on our spot monitor, where we have to drop everything we're doing and run to the Pokespot, because if we wait too long, the Wildmon will eat all of our bait and dip, leaving us with nothing. Having to drop everything you're doing to catch these Pokemon takes the wind right out of my sails. Shortly after this, we're going to be deep into some big fights, and all 3 monitors went off. So I had to turn around, sprint over, and waste all my Pokeballs trying to catch a Pokemon I didn't even want. There's never a convenient time for the spot monitor to go off, and that's really the big issue for me. Regardless, if you're willing to wait, these spots open the door to tons of new encounters I'll throw on screen now. Duking also has 3 trades on top of this, expanding the selection even further. After 500 hours of throwing Pokeballs, I caught a Gligar and called it a day, reluctantly adding him to the team because I think he is cool as fuck. More importantly though, we visit the secret cave Pokespot Duking tells us about, and we find the 2 goons from Pyrite, Shrewdly and Foley, waiting inside for the boss. And between you and me, the boss is the greatest villain design in any Pokemon game by a million light years. After a few minutes of back and forth with these grunts, the boss himself, Miror B, walks in, challenging us to a Pokemon battle. This fight rules. Miror B uses a bunch of Lombres with legit rain dance swift swim strategies, and the music combined with the crazy character design is just perfect. Also, here's a little fun fact I learned doing the research for this video. If you lose to Miror B in this fight, his Shadow Voltorb never respawns, locking you out of 100%ing the game and purifying all Shadow Pokemon. Very cool feature from a very old game. So we obviously clutch up and absolutely cook this guy. We learn he's a wanderer who previously worked for one of these villainous organizations like Cipher and now seeks Shadow Pokemon on his own. We're left with the Mirror Radar, which will randomly go off when he's at a Pokespot or either of the Colosseums, and oh my god, it's another spot monitor. Get used to dropping what you're doing, because rematching Miror B when the monitor goes off is the only way you can capture Shadow Pokemon you miss out on in battle by accidentally killing them. Cool feature, bad system, goated character. So after all this BS, we head to ONBS to regroup with Net. When we enter the building, it becomes apparent that Cipher has launched an attack to reclaim their data disk. Fighting our way through the building, I was skipping pretty much all of the optional battles in favor of getting to the boss fight I assumed would be waiting for us at the top. I mean, to be fair, the game hasn't necessarily been tough this far, and we were leveled on par with everyone we fought. Racing to the top, we heal up and are greeted by Cipher Commander Exol, who has taken Net's little sister hostage to get the disc back, while also wiping all the data off their computers. This is a major side note, but really stuck with me. You know, in a show like Tom and Jerry, after a while, you kinda just want Tom to win and finally catch Jerry? This is how I felt. Finally, a real organized villain group in a Pokemon game that were able to accomplish something, even using real villainous force and taking hostages. Not saying that's a good thing, but from a story perspective, it feels a lot more real and engaging to be fighting a group that poses a true threat. So we challenged Exol to a battle, and let me be frank, this was way harder than I anticipated. Exol uses 4 evolved level 23 Pokemon, and while I had 6 on my team, one was level 15, and the other was that stupid Gligar whose only damaging move was Poison Sting. After some good trades and maneuvering around, we get off some sand attacks to hopefully get some misses out of his Raichu, but bad luck was on our side, and paralysis ruins our chances. In the end, it was too much, and we actually lost. Shadow Mawile gets away, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but we legitimately lost a fight in a Pokemon game. I do not think that has happened to me in years. I want to make a note that I'm not out here trying to build the ultimate team. I know bringing a Gligar with horrible moves is a bad idea, and Mightyena isn't a strong Pokemon, but I'm playing through the game and using cool Pokemon I enjoy, as I think most people would. Not losing in years also isn't me saying I'm some godlike player who never loses a battle. I definitely lose a lot, but the recent entries have been so damn easy, I forgot what it was like to be challenged, and I really do miss it. What's more, we don't white out and go back to the Pokemon Center to get another shot at it. That was the shot. Exel flexes on us that he won, and then dips out with his job here complete. This fight was awesome. His team had some interesting strategies like a Raichu with Dig and a Shadow Steel type, and had my brain firing on all cylinders to find a path to victory. I'm not sure if this is a sign of a difficulty spike to come, but I do know I was definitely underleveled and straight up beat this time. With all that out of the way, Net lets us know the one thing he remembered from decrypting the ROM. Cipher had planned an attack on Phenac City, so we hop on our scooter and it's off for round 2 to see if we can take these guys down for real. Arriving in Phenac, we are immediately greeted by a lady who tells us we're the millionth visitor, and our reward is a battle CD case along with a trip to Realgam Tower, the premier battling arena of the region. Something is obviously fishy, but with no other clear path forward, we ship it over to Realgam. Here we can get a wide variety of activities going, including battle sims, a new shop, and my favorite, battle bingo. To be completely honest, sims are lame as fuck. The idea is you complete all these challenges you find in discs across the world, and they're different scenarios you have to solve to win the battle. In theory, it seems super sweet, almost like being set up with a chessboard and having to find the path to checkmate. In reality, I had almost zero interest in exploring these challenges. I'll throw on screen a few of the high level ones. The reward for each range from TMs to items like full restores and max revives. One really cool reward is in Battle CD 46. You receive the item called Sacred Ash, which fully revives and heals a fainted Pokemon. This item, associated with Ho-Oh, can't be obtained in any other way during Generation 3. Moving to the shop, they sell some amazing TMs like Light Screen, Reflect, and the trio of Fire Blast, Blizzard, and Thunder. Definitely more competitive aspect to what's going on here. Eventually, much like Pirate Coliseum, we'll be able to come here and fight other trainers to earn some loot. For now though, the main selling point of the tower is Battle Bingo. This minigame allows you to earn Poke Coupons to redeem at Mount Battle by filling out bingo sheets with Pokemon types. The trick is, you get a certain amount of entry points to go into a battle, and a certain amount of Master Balls to catch Pokemon. With those resources, you have to try and fill out as many lines as possible. When you click on a new space, it'll have a type, and one of your Pokemon has to go into battle and beat a Pokemon of that type, or you use a ball to catch it. The resource management is actually really fun, and it is a tester of your type chart knowledge. So after playing around for a bit, we head back to Phenac, where the woman we saw earlier says she hopes we stayed there forever. Kinda creepy, and so is the music. Also, the shop is closed and a lot of our paths are blocked off. Entering a certain house, we find it to be the mayor's, and here we have to get a music disc from one of the other houses to distract the girl downstairs. Once we do, we can head upstairs and find a note from the mayor spilling the beans on the attack. Cipher is eliminating all the town citizens and replacing them with peons as a cover-up. Super cool setup, and if you're asking why they attacked here, it's later suggested that the people of Phenac knew a bit too much due to their location. Back to the present, we're challenged by that girl, who is revealed to be a Cipher peon and absolutely smoker in the mayor's bedroom. When leaving the house, 6 oddly familiar clones come out of the pre-gym disguised as their leader, Justy. Before they leave the building and scatter around the city, they begin their iconic sound-off, and it's obvious that these are the Hexagon brothers from earlier. Not only that, but every single citizen has been replaced by Cipher peons and will fight us when approached. While we go around the city beating up all 6 Justy clones, I want to run through how I've been managing the team and shadows in the background. The Purification Chamber really is a blessing for getting all this done, but I'm slowly realizing if you want to do nothing other than use the same 6 Pokemon, that might actually make you OP. It's a weird dynamic to have 2 weaker Shadow Pokemon on my team, which is kind of how I've been running it. Reason being, they're super strong against non-shadows, but do absolutely no damage against other shadows, so there is incentive to always cycle those slots with new Pokemon. The Pokemon selection has been great up until this point, but in Phenac it really drops off. I'll put on screen everything available in this part of the game. A bit of a mixed bag, but overall a lower power level in the shadows being offered when compared to something like Ampharos, Claydol, or Walrein from earlier in the game. Also want to mention the stupid mirror radar went off, and I shipped it over to the Oasis Pokespot to fight him, netting us the Shadow Mawile we missed out on earlier. Back to the Justy fights, we can see the levels are about in line with our team, so we go around taking out each member and enter the pre-gym to confront the final clone. After defeating the goons inside, we learn that all citizens of Phenac are actually being trapped in the gym basement, and we need a key to get them out. With nowhere else to turn, we head up to the Coliseum located in the northernmost part of Phenac. Here, we find the news anchors who ran off earlier, along with the big band Snaddle. Here we go, baby. Snaddle has the goal of recovering the tapes from those reporters, along with keeping the city occupied, while someone named Gorgon can execute their plan. He confronts us and we enter into the boss battle of this zone. Right off the bat, I begin to notice this game's bosses have a much higher level to their team than the grunts do, and I think that's how it should be. Snaddle has some threatening leads and sends out a Shadow Lunatone after we take one out. This is one of the first times a Shadow hasn't come out last as a sort of ace. Overall, the battle was solid in difficulty, we came out on top, but I wouldn't call it easy. This is going to be a tough battle. Alright, that sets up for one more confusion kill. We take a shockwave, that's fine. Should do nothing. Big flinch. Confusion, go for a flinch into the lantern. I don't think it has static. I think it has lightning rod, actually. I think it actually has lightning rod or water absorb. Those are the only two abilities it can have. That's a shadow Pokemon extremely early. That did nothing, holy shit. Big flinch, though. He's gonna bite into the Lunatone. I don't think it OHKOs. So I'm actually gonna switch Pharaoh out for Mawile and bite into the Lunatone one more time. Crit me, cool. Holy fuck, that does a lot of damage. All right, big boy. I think we huck a Great Ball at the Lunatone. And we fake out into the lantern.
huge. That's massive. This was always weird to me in this boss fight, that there's a cast form in Sky, Shadow Sky, and he's like obviously a weather team. So you'd think cast form would transform into some sort of weather type, but it just doesn't. Shadow Rush the Lantern, Brick Break into the cast form. Does Weather Ball work with Shadow? Yes, it does. Okay. Live. Gotta live. Nice. Need to kill something here? Huge. Fucking Oko City, dog. Is it just the Metang left? Yeah. Okay. Shadow Rush the Metang. Switch into Grimer? Thunder Punch is cool. Switch to Watts.
A big piece of the win was catching Lunaton with the first Pokeball we threw. This has really been a trend through the entire game. Anytime we catch a Shadow early in the fight, it becomes so much easier. It's also important to note that Shadow Pokemon have a much higher catch rate than you would normally find on Pokemon in the wild. With that, Snaddle goes down and we take our victory. Not only that, but the news team was recording, so now we're famous, which is pretty sweet. We can take the key Snaddle drops and unlock the pre-gym, freeing all the civilians, concluding our quest in Phenac. A short but sweet part to the adventure. The real Justy lets us know that they were held hostage, he presumes, because the citizens kept seeing people come in and out of the desert, marking our map with the facility's location. So we have our next mission, but before we leave, we go and talk to the mayor, who gives us the experience share, which is absolutely huge. Trying to train up low-level Shadow Pokemon has been a grind, because they just get one shot due to not leveling while Shadows. Now we can keep them safe in the back and slowly rack up experience. You gotta love it. With that, our time in this beautiful city comes to a close, and we head off to the mysterious desert landmark. So after tending to our purifications and stocking up, we head out into the desert where we are quickly halted by our shitty little scooter being unable to make it through the sand. This leaves us in Phenac with an email from Net saying he found people who lost a Pokemon on the SS Libra, that big ship we saw Shadow Lugia steal during the intro cutscene. So we head off and meet them, and when we arrive at ONBS, Net lets us know the old mechanic in Gateon can actually upgrade our bike. But of course, showing up in Gateon, he's not there. Instead, he's visiting Dr. Kaminko's lab. The wild goose chase continues, and one thing of note in Gateon is the crossing of paths with Mr. Varric, and the two extremely evil bodyguards who congratulate us on our victory. Very not suspicious at all. Shipping it once more over to the lab, Chobin, quite familiarly, stops us and mistakes us for a burglar. Again. He battles us with his terrible team, and we swiftly take down each and every one of his Pokemon. When the battle is over, the doctor himself comes out to assess the commotion and decides it's time to unleash their Robo Groudon to stop this burglary. Apparently the doctor is also blind. This leads to a actually badass scene where quite possibly the shittiest invention of all time is unveiled. The first robot Pokemon. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh damn, we're actually going to battle a robot legendary. This is going to be awesome. And to my surprise, when we enter the fight, it's just Chobin sitting in the machine, throwing out Pokeballs as normal. This literally made me laugh out loud because this Groudon does nothing in regards to battling. Kaminko's inventions are horrible if you dig into the game, but this one takes the cake. Even worse than the shoes that purposefully make your feet hurt. Once again, the game's writing shines and we work our way through this surprisingly interesting battle. Chobin boasts a Sun team with a random Gyarados to boot. We get our big win and are free to speak to the mechanic Makin in his lab. He takes us to the shop and repairs our scooter, allowing us to progress. Scooting into the desert, we find the Libra basically destroyed and abandoned. Throughout the ship there are little puzzles for us to solve, which made me super nostalgic for those old school Pokemon games, and along with the puzzles come loot. But before we can loot, we must fight, and a crazy looking guy named Gorgon is aboard the vessel, ready to pack up. I'm sure we'll see him later, but for now, his grunt is tasked with stopping us, and that just doesn't end well for the poor guy. We take him out with ease, and after he runs away like a massive baby, some old hobo comes out from the boat to let us know he lives there. Very cool. So this is where the storylines all intersect. This part of the game is definitely a bit chaotic, but now the hobo lets us know he's been hearing strange noises from the bottom of the ship, and asks us to go check it out. Obviously this is referring to the Pokemon that went missing we were tasked with finding by Net. Making our way down the Libra, there are a boatload of puzzles, no pun intended, and while we solve these, I want to reflect a bit on the game so far. It's pretty clear we're entering the mid/late game. The items we're finding are stronger, Pokemon are mostly evolved, and I'm excited to see what these dungeons have in store for us. The difficulty has been pretty spot on for me at this point, but I'm hoping for a bit more of a challenge as we continue forward. Aside from that, it feels like the stage has been set. We know most of the major characters, have a clear objective of our path forward, and the end game is visible. Battles are definitely less frequent now, or at least required battles, which is great to see. And this section of the game, where we travel back to older locations, really makes the world feel complete. So back to looting, the items here are much better than before, with vitamins to raise stats, evolution stones, and even a dang flamethrower TM, which I love to see. As we make it to the bottom of the Libra, we find the lost Pokemon, a little Bonsley, and as we attempt to walk over slowly and grab him, our email goes off, spooking him, and he makes a run for it. It is heavily implied this little bastard will show up at Pokespots go forward, which you know I'm super stoked about, and we head out of the ship to continue our adventure. Now the real Pokemon heads among you might be wondering something. Isn't Bonsley a baby Pokemon? And weren't baby Pokemon introduced in Gen 4? This game came out before the DS Pokemon games, so what's the deal? Well, everything you may or may not be thinking is correct. This game actually revealed the baby Pokemon Bonsley and Munchlax for the first time to the world, which is pretty sweet. Back in reality though, we can exit the ship and are greeted by 3 members of Team Snag, an old organization that used to work with Cipher. These guys really want our Snag machine, and to get it, they do the smartest thing a Pokemon villain has ever done. They put our ass to sleep. No need to battle, they just get what they want. Brilliant. With the Snag machine gone, we're left without the ability to, you guessed it, snag Pokemon. So we exit the Libra, snagless and afraid, making our way to the Cipher Key Lab that homeless man told us about. Here we meet up with our old pal Zook, who is actively dunking on some Team Snag'em members. We watch the battle go down between Zook and Snag'em member Biden. Yes, this dude is actually named Biden, and Biden isn't the best battler, with his poor oddish Getic one-shot. I'm a big fan of this feature where enemies battle and we actually spectate what goes down. Zook scares off old Joe and his friends leave us to fight instead. His team is decent, with the ace Shadow Zangoose hitting extremely hard, and as a reminder, we are snagless, so the Shadow will just have to wait. After claiming our victory, Zook just stands around, refusing to fight us again. He does, however, reveal some interesting information, claiming that after his defeat at Gateon to that Yoda-looking guy, Mr. Varick, he was demoted by Gorrigan. This is why we find him just chilling outside the Key Lab as a bodyguard. But for a massive moron, Zook raises a really good point. How would Gorrigan even know about Zook's defeat in Gateon? No one from Cipher was there. Well, if it hasn't been incredibly obvious the entire game, it's now all but confirmed Mr. Varick, the Yoda-looking man, and his bodyguards, or some mix of those three, are connected to Cipher and informed Gorrigan of Zook's defeat. Gorrigan, again, was the weird guy we saw on the Libra and the presumable boss of this Cipher Key Lab. With that massive plot twist out of the way, we can move on. The bodyguards won't let us into the Key Lab, but that just doesn't matter, because an email from Sec at ONBS says to come over right away. When we arrive, we're informed that they've contacted an ex-lab worker of Cipher's, and we can go to the Outskirt Stand to get the lowdown. Arriving at the stand, something hilarious happens. The mirror radar goes off, and I obviously became instantly pissed, but when we go to check the location, it shows he just so happens to be at the Outskirt Stand. Awesome little touch to introduce the battle, and I must say Miror B is really living up to the title of Wanderer. Well, we take on his army of Lombres, and with that comes the most random Shadow Nose Pass of all time. If you haven't missed a snag by now, congratulations. But in this battle, we're forced to miss the snag without our machine. This is an excellent way, without a tutorial, to teach the player that Miror B will have the Shadow Pokemon they miss, because next time the radar goes off, we'll be able to grab Nose Pass. So defeating the goat, we can now enter the stand where the ex-scientist Hordle will be waiting. If it hasn't yet felt like things are building up to the late game, now is the time it becomes obvious. Hordle reveals the location of the Team Snag'em hideout we can visit to get back our precious Snag machine. So that makes 2 massive dungeons full of juicy Shadow Pokemon waiting for us to clear them. The cherry on top is what's being sold in the Outskirt Stand. Here we can buy every type of Pokeball under the sun, including Ultra Balls and Timer Balls, which will be absolutely massive later on. If you didn't already love this place, it's about to get better, because Hordle tells us he was able to smuggle one Shadow Pokemon out of the lab, and we should purify it. This Shadow Pokemon is a Togepi with Serene Grace. Incredible. If we purify this Togepi and bring it back to him, he'll give us an Elekid in return. A cool Pokemon to be sure, so either way it's a pretty big win. And as we step outside the Outskirt Stand, a potentially familiar face catches us and asks us for a battle. This is Willy, who is the first trainer you battle in Pokemon Colosseum. Accepting his challenge begins the battle, and fun fact, this is the only battle in the game to use the music from Colosseum. Really nice touch. Unfortunately for Willy, his team fucking sucks, so we destroy him and go about our merry way. With the stage set, we're ready to take on the Snag'em hideout, recover our machine, and destroy Cipher's Key Lab. Heading out to the massive Snag'em factory, it is quickly apparent this group is not in the best of shape. The entire base is filled with rubble, broken beams, and it's a great throwback to the fact that our dad in Pokemon Colosseum actually blew this place to bits. Regardless, we're greeted with a battle at the door, and it becomes clear we are very under-leveled. The grunt we're facing has Pokemon at or above our level, which isn't a great sign for the impending boss fight with Gonzap, Snag'em's leader. Battling our way through, the trend continues of items on the ground being much more valuable, and I make an effort to collect literally everything we see. This includes a Psychic TM along with a bunch of revives and hyper potions. Something I think that's easy to gloss over, but I definitely want to make a note of for this game is the fact that it's using Generation 3 mechanics. While Generation 3 was an awesome generation of Pokemon games, there is the idea of the physical special split which didn't exist back then. Basically, this means that certain types are inherently either physical or special. This is something that's been rectified in modern Pokemon games, allowing for, let's say, fire types to get access to both physical and special moves, but back in these older games, everything was type locked. In gameplay terms, this translates to a lot of Pokemon actually not being very useful because they might have an extremely high physical or special stat, but be unable to use any moves of their effective type. An example of this is Shadow Ball. With every ghost type move being physical in Generation 3, it really didn't belong on Espeon since its special attack stat is so weak. As far as the quality of Pokemon we've been seeing, it continues to be pretty strong. And again, while the moves aren't the strongest on any of the Pokemon we've collected so far, they all definitely offer a varied enough moveset, or at least some sort of niche to keep them interesting. I'll definitely want to monitor how this changes go forward though, because as the game gets more difficult and we enter the late game, I think it's going to be challenging using 60 or 70 power moves to get past some of these super high level Pokemon. That's again why I'm so happy to see a Psychic and Shadow Ball TM on the ground here. I somehow managed to pick the perfect path, and within 3 battles we make it to the top of the building, finding Waken, the guy who put us to sleep with his Gloom, as well as the man himself, Gonzap. I love the design of a large dungeon with many valuable items worth your time, but the majority being optional. This lets us tackle it in any way we see fit. Hilariously, we can see the Snag machine sitting on the table in front of Gonzap, and he's super pissed because his arms are just too big to use the machine. Well, they're not just going to hand it over, so Waken challenges us and predictably uses a lead of 2 Glooms. Severely underleveled, this fight is a challenge, and in the back of my mind, I can't shake the feeling we'll be tossed right into the Gonzap fight after this. The idea of 2 battles back to back with no chance to heal is an interesting way to make the game more challenging. It allows for healing items to be used more tactically, along with forcing the player to fight a large variety of different threats. Waken does some work, and our team ends up getting severely weakened. He's sporting a level 31 Fortress, which crushes our Pokemon that are ranging in the mid to high 20s. The highlight here is the final Pokemon, a Grumpig of all things. This pig, to my knowledge at least, sports no attacking moves in favor of spamming Taunt and Light Screen repeatedly. I'm gonna guess this was purposeful, and if you catch this oddity, your reward is a free opportunity to heal the squad up without taking any damage before the battle with Gonzap. With that opportunity, that's exactly what we do, and without this chance, I don't think there's a way we're beating him. Such a neat trick from the developers, and I might just be giving them credit saying this was purposeful, but this is the only Pokemon we really fight that doesn't use attacking moves at all. So once we get the squad healed up, it's time to battle the boss, and just as I predicted, there's no way to heal in between the fights, so you better hope you took the chance when you had it. Gonzap sends out a lead of Electrode and Nuzleaf, both at level 30 or higher, and with 5 Pokemon on his team to boot. That being said, I took this fight much more serious than any of the ones before.
My lead shit for this. Alright, Bond, Brick Break into the Nuzleaf. Barrow early, probably. No, Watts. Please don't fake out entire Yama. Ouch. Don't get paralyzed. Huge. Alright, none of these guys like super threaten Bond. Just break into the Electrode and switch out into Pharaoh. No paralysis, please. Huge. Ugh. Coco. Yes. Okay, Watts mucks on the Skarmory, so double into the Wish Cache for now. Oh my god, we crit him? Ooh, like a champ.
With lucky crits, dodging some paralysis, and much better luck than the Exalt fight, we managed to take Gonzap out without too much of a fuss. Again, I really don't think this would have been possible if we did not heal during the Waken fight. Super cool design to build the fights in such a way, allowing us to get creative without blatantly giving us time post-battle, breaking the immersion of being in the boss's chambers. Gonzap accepts his defeat with grace and decides to hand over the Snag machine. Coming to the conclusion, we're on the same side. Both of us are aiming to take down Cipher. Snag serves a great purpose in the game, being a villainous organization in theory, but having the same goal of defeating a much more villainous organization. The Snag machine now back in our possession, we're free to explore the rest of the building, and I fight a few more trainers as we're pretty underleveled as I said. This game is really battle heavy, but having the freedom to pick and choose when we want to take on extra fights has been a saving grace. It allows us to scale our team and only level and grind when we feel necessary. A lot of the times I think it's easy to get burnt out during these Pokemon games when you're just doing battle after battle, but the idea that we can potentially capture Shadow Pokemon and dodge a lot of the fights that don't have Shadow Pokemon have really kept my interest. Exiting the Snag base, there's one more obstacle in our way: the Cipher Key Lab. By now we've heard of this place a million times and have only gotten as far as the front door. With the Snag machine back and our team leveled, it's time to take the fight to Cipher. By now, we really have entered the late game. We've met most characters, discovered most locations, and have accessed over 30 Pokemon, which in my opinion is enough to build a pretty strong team. That in mind, I decided it was time for some changes. Up until now, I'd been using Pokemon for fun, again not considering synergy or power, but with another difficulty spike, it's time to get serious. The Mightyena that we've been using really wasn't cutting it, and we needed more power. This was the first time in a long time that I felt the need to build a more powerful team in a Pokemon game, and I really don't mind it. The idea of double battles and a lot of the items we're being given have much more of a competitive oriented mindset towards the game. With the Key Lab coming up soon as well, we have a lot of options that are going to become available as far as Shadow Pokemon. All that out of the way, we head back to the lab, again greeted by our buddy Zook. This time, when he takes us on, we can use the Snag machine to steal his signature Zangoose, cook the rest of his team, and I think this is finally the last time we're going to hear from Zook. The guards who were blocking the path before are still a problem, but surprisingly Gonzap and Team Snag'em come to the rescue, putting the guards to sleep with a gloom that looks awfully familiar. This strategy is so OP, and I don't know why more people aren't just spamming Spore and Sleep Powder in the Pokemon world. Nevertheless, the guards are down and our path into the lab becomes clear. It was extremely obvious by the purple swirling water outside the facility. This is where Shadow Pokemon are being produced, and there's even some workers here that'll validate that theory. This lab is massive, and the main room has 3 branching paths for us to take. Knowing the game has spiced up the difficulty and the loot we've been able to find has been great, I want to get in all the battles possible, along with collecting everything we can. We can ensure we do this by using a neat trick I've figured out while playing. Other than those 2 Pokemon early, Pokemon XD will almost never put a Shadow Pokemon in an optional battle, and will never put Shadow Pokemon in battles that disappear. For example, the lab after we clear it. Knowing this, the second we get into a fight with our opponent and they have a Shadow Pokemon, we know it's the main path to progress through the area. Using this method, we can spread out and see what other areas have to offer to make sure we're 100% completing and collecting everything available. The first encounter on the main path has us facing against an adorable Growlithe that fits perfectly into the team, already being at a solid level 28. This is a massive upgrade over Mightyena, and I instantly spend all of our money on Colognes and use a Firestone to evolve him. With Arcanine joining the squad, we have 5 of the 6 members who I feel will be in it for the long haul. That remains to be seen though, as Shadow Pokemon again are pretty overpowered when you're fighting other Shadow Pokemon because they just don't take damage. The rest of the lab is chock full of battles and more shadows to snag. Our levels are now getting more in line with our foes, which is a great sign. We trudge deeper and deeper, but stop when an all too familiar buzz goes off. The fucking mirror radar. Begrudgingly, I stop all forward momentum, dip out of the lab, and head to Realgum Coliseum where Miror B is waiting for us with the Shadow Nose Pass we were unable to snag earlier. This is the one required Shadow Pokemon you have to get from Miror B, which again, I quite like. Yes, it's stopping the forward progress. Yes, the mirror radar is incredibly annoying, but entering the tournament is a great excuse to grind up some more experience. Finally, in the semi-finals of the tournament, Miror B makes his appearance, and on his team is none other than the Nose Pass from earlier, putting us back to 100% after we snag it. Flavor-wise, I love seeing Miror B in the arena. In my head, the idea of him making his living by winning Pokemon tournaments is a really great fit. Once that's done, we scale back up to the lab and get to the rooftop where some scientist lets us know we can use a system lever that we conveniently picked up earlier to literally blow up the entire facility. Beating him in battle, we do just that, and unsurprisingly, people are not happy about it. We're engaged before we get the chance to hit a Pokemon Center, a move this game pulls pretty often. You're going to want to be conscious of when you're healing because you might enter a new room and immediately be put in a battle when you thought you would have time to heal up. We're challenged by the grunt Smarten we met earlier, and taking out his team allows us to finally challenge the boss of this place, Gorgon. As I mentioned, we've been roughly in line with opponents' levels, and I know I'm stressing this, but I think it's pretty important to keep an eye on the difficulty because I feel like it's been really swingy in this game. Smarten does bump up that scale, and Gorgon follows suit, using a team of all level 36s, when our average is closer to 32.
Laron and Celio. Brick break into the Laron and flamethrower into the Laron? Just double into it? Alright, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna fake out the Celio and flamethrower the Laron. We protects. Interesting. Okay. I bet they can use fake out then. Fighting should be super effective here, so I'm thinking we can brick break here, flamethrower here. This is super effective, right? And it's special, so it's hopefully pretty good against the Laron. It's neutral damage. Burn. See what this does here. This should kill pretty easily. Yeah, nice. Well, we got to take whatever this Laron has in store for us, which might be brutal. That's a strong Pokemon right there. Iron Tail misses. Okay, that's massive. All right, so Bond, we will see you. We'll bring Watson, and we'll use you to just flamethrower down the Laron. Oh, if it protects though. If it protects, it's fine. That's fine. Just don't one-shot our Arcanine. Oh. I just got owned. Okay. That's a ton of damage. Holy shit. Well, let's Thunderbolt the Slowking. I almost want to Thunderbolt and take down the Slowking, but we'll Flamethrower, because I don't think T-Bolt actually one-shots a Slowking. So let's do that. Let's double into it. Like, Slowking's super bulky. This might kill? I actually don't know. Okay, we got him. I don't think we would have one-shot there, though. Alright, what do we got next? Ursaring. Wish I had Bond. And this thing gets to get off an Earthquake. Okay, they both have Earthquake. Well, that's a double KO for our buddy here. Oh, Tapas hangs on like a boss. Alright. So we can send Bond back in. Pretty free here. This Lyron's gonna protect, though. We know that. So here's what we'll do. We'll fake out the Ursaring and flamethrower the Lyron. Now protect what it procs first. Alright. I think it's definitely better there to be able to kill the Ursaring. Primeape, okay. Shadow Primeape, okay. Ursaring flinches. We'll brick break the Ursaring. And let's bite into the Primeape. This is gonna hurt. Crit! Oh. Please outspeed Ursaring. Oh no. Well, that's a double KO for you. Also, he's gonna kill his own fucking Primeape next turn. Alright, we're down to 2 Pokemon. Psychic the Ursaring, use an Ultra Ball on the Primeape and pray to the gods. Let's see. That's huge. Okay. We're still not in a good position if he earthquakes here. This, I don't know if this Okos. I think it might. Huge. Okay. I almost want to just bite into him, but I won't. I'm going to Confusion. And... no, I'm actually going to Quick Attack and Ice Beam, I think. Just a neutral Ice Beam shouldn't be too crazy. Yeah. Uh-oh. Alright, that's not that bad. So we'll throw a ball with Pharaoh and then just rip another Ice Beam into him. I mean, that's a full side of 6 Pokemon right there. Catching the Primeape on the first ball was so clutch, though. Because we have to sit around just letting that thing rip shadow attacks into us for a while. Freeze. Alright, Quick Attack and Ultra Ball. I can honestly... yeah, I got an Ultra Ball, because if we don't catch this soon... these are our only 2 Pokemon, and then we have little Shadow Pidgeotto. Nice. Those are both good options, too. Good Pokemon.
I think now is a good time to mention these bosses, as Gorgon is the last we'll face before the endgame. Overall, the design is interesting and the fights are challenging, but from a character development standpoint, they're about as interesting as stale bread. Nothing new coming from a Pokemon game, but there really isn't much going on between the ears with these guys. Everybody just loves Cipher, loves Shadows, and wants to kick our ass. Kind of a disappointment in the more narrative-driven, story-driven Pokemon game that XD presents itself as. Nevertheless, the fights have been awesome, and at the end of the day, that's what matters most. So we snag both of Gorgon's Shadows and take him out with a satisfying end to the Key Lab arc. Little Master Greville, the true villain, shows his ugly face and claims their plan is still in effect with the perfection of XD001, the shadow Pokemon that can never be purified. We're just gonna have to see about that. As Gorgon flees like a massive baby, he drops the Shadow Monitor, giving us a full list of Pokemon we can snag, which is a nice touch. This would be the only way you can really keep track of Pokemon you've missed thus far, and also gives us spoilers on what we're going to see go forward, and this list is ridiculous towards the bottom. The way to the exit is relatively uneventful until we get to a conveyor belt near the entrance, where we hear some man with a massive afro just took off with the last Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Dragonite. All in all, the Key Lab is solid but pretty samey when we're looking at the dungeons we've experienced so far. With Shadow Pokemon no longer being produced, the game enters what I would consider the final arc, and it's time to take down the old man Yoda, Master Greville. Okay, so I really don't know if I missed something here, but the beginning of this next arc is literally not explained in any way, shape, or form. It feels like there's a piece of the story that's missing I just never picked up on. First things first, we visit Crane back at the Pokemon Lab, and he bestows unto us the Master Ball, which is a huge grab for later. We then ride to Gateon port on our scooter, and randomly, there's a Kyogre looking ass boat just sitting in the water. When we talked to the mechanic from earlier, he basically says, "Oh shit, Cipher's on Citadark Isle? Well, that's awesome, because I built a robot Kyogre that can go to Citadark Isle." Super random, and literally not explained at all. Apparently you're supposed to go to Kaminko's lab and fight Chobin and do some shit and then figure this out. Regardless, we didn't have to do that, so we now have access to Cipher's final lair, Citadark Isle. When we hop on the boat, we're greeted with this pretty epic cutscene of us arriving, and we see Master Greville and his goons surrounded by peons. Reminds me a ton of Star Wars. So this is it. This is Cipher's main base and the final dungeon of the game. Let me be clear here. This place is fucking massive. I'm talking like 4 to 5 hours of gameplay massive. It's a serious undertaking and definitely not doable in just one sitting. For context, we enter the island with Pokemon at level 31, level 32, whatever, and we end this area with a team entirely at or above level 40. The only major prep that we had to do for this was tending to the Purification chamber, as we've been doing all game, and stocking up on Pokeballs. But with all of that out of the way, we can dive in. Now, of course, the convenient elevator we saw Greville use that goes right to the top of the mountain doesn't work, so we'll have to go the long way. But of course, the long way is never easy, and we must battle and own the entire yacht crew that brought Varric here, Varric being Master Greville. One thing you'll notice within Citadark Isle, there's just random people chilling here. No shadows, nothing to do with Cipher, just random ass dudes that want to battle. I'm really not sure why they're here, but we need to take on every fight possible, because this final battle may just be the most broken team in Pokemon history. Beating all the randoms on the first floor is pretty easy, and as we step off the elevator, of course I didn't heal. We're greeted by Lavrina, the first Cipher admin we faced on our adventure. This signifies a trend that will continue throughout Citadark. Beat down a bunch of grunts, then face a past boss, rinse and repeat a handful of times. That whole system really makes Citadark Isle feel like a boss rush mode, which is something I'm a massive fan of. In a strange way, it feels like this game's version of an Elite Four run, but in between, you need to do a bunch of battling because the fights get progressively more broken. The feeling of a looming challenge does spark some competitive drive in me though, and makes massive amounts of total battles feel more manageable. Again, this game is very battle heavy, and Citadark is the prime example of that. It's also nice to take breaks and ship it back to the HQ to mess with the Purification chamber from time to time. With that being said, Lavrina is far and away the easiest battle we'll face, and getting past her isn't much more than a small hassle. Ascending the elevator, we are on Zone 2 of Citadark, where we can see a giant whirlpool in the middle of the room. After talking to some of the scientists, we can learn Cipher have been making massive waves and messing with the currents to make Citadark virtually impossible to reach, so long as you don't have a massive Kyogre boat, which we do. These fights are nothing special other than the raw number of shadows we can catch. In Citadark alone, there are almost 30 shadow Pokemon to capture. The entire game has 83, so over a third of what's offered is in this one area. We'll kind of discuss it later, but it really is strange knowing we're nearing the end of the game and finding a cool shadow Pokemon you want to use. Because if you throw it in the Purification chamber, it's going to be under-leveled by the time it's pure, but if you put it on your team, it'll never get purified in time for the final battle. So it's this weird middle ground of like balancing powerful shadows we're meeting and keeping the old guard around. Descending deeper into the mountain, I want to touch on the shadow dynamic in the late game. Early on, shadow moves weren't much of an issue. They were lower powered, and combined with no stab, it made it a lot more manageable when fighting them with purified Pokemon. Now that the quality of shadow Pokemon is rising, and I mean really rising, Along with the level, more powerful shadow type moves are becoming available, and it's apparent using shadows on your team is almost mandatory if you want to snag everything in front of you. The only way to get through some of the counters efficiently is to wipe out their non-shadows and then send in some of your shadows to stall while you throw ball after ball at your opponent's team. This can be really time consuming, but again, I don't want to have to wait 20 minutes in an arena run to meet Miror B for every single shadow we miss. This in and of itself is fine though, but especially now it feels like the game is pushing us to be more creative with combos like Sunny Day, Solar Beam, Belly Drum Psycho, etc. Really cool combos that I'd want to use in a double battle. That would again all be fine and dandy, except I can't do that because I'm so heavily incentivized to whittle down my opponent's Pokemon and snag them rather than just sweeping full teams. Incredibly powerful combos, unless you have a move like False Swipe, aren't super useful when you have to catch half your opponent's Pokemon. I think this could be solved by having a more efficient system to get back the shadow Pokemon you miss, but as it stands, re-snagging a Mon means an entire tournament run, again taking over 10 to 20 minutes. My honest solution is to not care about 100%ing the snags and kill what you want while catching what you like. That then creates the problem though of diluting the game's difficulty, an entire premise which is a whole nother issue. To summarize, as I enter the late game, the challenge is still there in these fights, but the main gimmick of shadow Pokemon seems to be getting in the way of team building creativity and overall pacing. At the end of the day, all these shadow Pokemon are one type, have one style of move, and just dish out a bunch of damage. There's not really a lot of room to be creative there. Back to Mount Doom, we're out here solving puzzles and literally scaling the insides of an active volcano. I'm going through every fight, but in this video, I am skipping a lot of fights. Just know that it's taking a bunch of time because we have to constantly go back and heal after every few. The puzzles include moving platforms, pushing blocks, and they're somewhat interesting, while leading to a few hidden items in the area, which I always appreciate. Once we make it to a large elevator, we're transported to the top of the mountain with a beautiful view of the Death Star sitting over lava. I made the mistake of taking one step too far and getting into a battle with Snaddle, the second Cipher admin. We are quickly smoked and have to run all the way back up to take him on again. The fight's challenging, but the team pulls through and we move on. Really nothing too special here, but again, I want to emphasize all of these fights have been really fun. As we ascend along the final bridge, a familiar buzz chimes in. It's the fucking mirror radar. This time it's a mag cargo calling that I crit inside the volcano like 30 minutes ago. So we run to Realgum, take on the challenge, and now, finally, we can advance. One of Greville's right-hand men, Ardos, is sitting out front and challenges us to a battle. The whole vibe of a boss rush mode is setting in fully, and this shit absolutely rules. His team is no joke, sitting in the mid-40s for levels with powerful Pokemon like Alakazam and Swellow as leads. This one took me pretty close to the limits, but our last few Pokemon clutch up and we move on. Inside the Death Star, little Yoda Man and his other boyfriend are waiting for us behind a thin glass wall that they assume is enough to keep us out. Obviously they're right, so we turn around and go home defeated. As we do though, our buddy Gorgon pops out of a nearby elevator and wants some honor back after we last kicked his ass. We fight, we win. Simple as that. Seriously though, I am glazing over a lot of these battles, but the teams these guys are packing actually rule. Gorgon uses some Protect Earthquake stuff with a powerful team using Pokemon like Ursaring, Slowking, and Walrein. By this point I drank the Kool-Aid and was using a Shadow Electabuzz to cut everything's HP in half and tank massive Shadow attacks. Yes, there is a Shadow move that just halves everyone's HP, but you have to recharge like Hyper Beam. Some of these moves are pretty ridiculous. The fights all end up turning into stalling out Shadow attacks and throwing Pokeballs to catch their remaining Mon. Gorgon actually got us down to our last two Pokemon, but once again, we clutch up and proceed onward. Taking the convenient elevator, we can now reach Eldis, the last of the goons to defeat before Greville. His team is stacked, sporting 4 Shadow Pokemon, including a Lapras and a level 50 Salamence. Here it becomes quite clear the purified Pokemon we've been using are all just bait to get one shot, and we will get sliced up if we're not careful. It's pretty clear that I'm skipping most of these important boss fights, and I know I really don't want to be doing that, but I think a 25-minute fight with Eldis here, for example, isn't going to help me get my point across any further. I do just want to note that if I did include all of these, the video would be well over 3 or 4 hours hours long. That being said, while playing the game, each of these fights has a lot in store for you. There's fantastic team combinations from the enemies, along with super powerful shadow Pokemon you can have join your team. Citadark Isle being 4 to 5 hours long can feel a bit ridiculous, and honestly the battles were starting to get to me by this point. But having this boss rush finale towards the end really made it all feel worth it. We're getting to flex our skills and be able to use these powerful Pokemon we've been collecting all game. Managing to snag every single one of the 4, we come out victorious. And before taking on Greville, I made a game time decision to sub in that broken ass Salamence and that Lapras we just grabbed. Finally, after 1.5 million battles and after almost 20 hours of gameplay, there is no one left. We are taking on the man himself, Yoda, Master Greville. He reveals his last weapon, XD001, the namesake of this game, the unpurifiable Shadow Lugia. This thing is a beast, and the whole introduction is nothing short of awesome. We watch as the monster towers over us and then are thrown into battle with this incredibly powerful Shadow Legendary. We send out our team of weak, poor, low-level Pokemon and Master Ball. Yep, that's literally it. The Lugia is ours, and we win. GG Greville. Now, in actuality, this battle is just the beginning. We may have the Lugia, but that just makes Greville even more pissed off. With his back against the wall, he challenges us to a true final battle with his 6-man team of all Shadow Pokemon.
Okay, Rhydon and Moltres. So I outspeed the Rhydon for sure. So I think I reflect, fake out the Moltres. He hit the first Shadow End. That sucks. That takes a bunch of damage in return. Let's switch into Lapras or Mence? Let's switch into Mence and get the Intimidate off. This is turn 2, by the way. I gotta keep track of this. It's not too bad. That does cause burn though, right? No burn. Miss. Okay, what do we want to do here? It's 8 levels higher. An Ultra Ball. Rhydon. This is turn 3. Oh, that's huge. Okay, 1 down. Executor. Now I'm hoping we just put the Moltres in red. We have to live a Shadow Fire, but I got the light screen up. Oh, he goes immense. Okay. Oh my god, that's so good. Massive, okay. Alright, now we have Tauros. Okay, that's huge. Bird comes up next. Sky, that's totally fine. That's another 50-50.
People, let me just say, this team is ridiculous. I mean, look at it. All 3 of the legendary birds is fucking insane, all at level 50 with custom shadow type moves that are incredibly powerful. So this fight actually plays more like a puzzle than a Pokemon battle, with the idea being, how can I snag all 6 of those Pokemon without killing them? Because if we use 2 shadow Pokemon of our own, we can basically stall them out forever as long as we have the healing items to back it up. The Lapras bot actually has shell armor, which means it can't be crit, and our Salamence has Intimidate. So we can just Intimidate cycle over and over, never worry about getting crit, and stall infinitely. Until we run out of Hyper Potions at least. Calling it a stall fest is a bit of an oversimplification. The fight is incredibly challenging, but the gimmick here is you can beat Greville and repeatedly challenge him over and over to slowly snag Pokemon off his team. As you snag more, they'll be replaced with new ones, making up for an entirely new fight. This mechanic is actually awesome. Challenging the boss over and over again, his team shifts every time you snag a Pokemon. It does break immersion a little bit, the fact that we can beat Greville and then just come back and he's still there, but I get that the devs probably didn't expect you to catch all 6 Pokemon at once. I am incredibly proud to say that I snagged every single one of Greville's stupid Pokemon on this one fight, which is something as a child I thought to be impossible. It took a little bit of luck, but we did it. I kid you not, this fight and the Lugia fight combined took well over a half an hour, throwing Pokeball after ball, but we did it. And man, this was an epic conclusion to the game. The team full of shadows was super fun to work around, using a combination of light screens, healing, damaging, and status moves, all to secure victory. A legitimate puzzle in my mind, and a fitting end to the game. With his whole world shattered, the little Yoda man falls to the ground and, convinced by his son Eldest, yes, those two are his kids, he repents for his action, deciding to take whatever fate he is deserving of. We pan out of the Death Star and fade back to the most glorious 480p cutscene of fans cheering for us across the lands. All the characters with no backstory that we met across our adventure come together and celebrate. Truly an epic end to an epic game. As the credits roll, it's time to wrap up our adventure and go through some of the post-game thoughts. Booting up once again, we can head to Gateon and find Miror B, who will challenge us, lending the opportunity to snag the final Shadow Pokemon, Dragonite. Aegon speaks to us of the Ore Coliseum, a place that allows us to rebattle all the villains from earlier in our adventure, and other than some small side quests or Mount Battle, that about does it. So was Pokemon XD a perfect game like I remembered? God no, this game suffers objectively from some serious flaws, like way too much battling, inconsistent pacing and difficulty, and next to no character development. With that said though, Pokemon XD is one of the most creative, experimental, bold, and engaging titles in the franchise's history, and for that, it must be commended. It truly did feel like an adventure with a complete middle, beginning, and end, which wouldn't be saying much outside of the context of Pokemon. The real killer here is the Shadow Pokemon mechanic. Other than the final few fights, this mechanic had me chomping at the bit to keep exploring and purifying and find every single available Pokemon to use in that limited pool. And that limited pool helped us develop more interesting and cohesive teams. The developers really only give you 83 Shadow Pokemon to use, but went for a less is more approach, giving each one an interesting and diverse move pool and ability. Boss battles are some of the most challenging and creative I've ever played in a Pokemon game, and for the most part, XD provides ample interesting locations and setups to keep you going. The one thing I think this game did that left a lasting impression of perfection was the double battles. In my opinion, double battles simply offer more complexity and more room for creativity when compared to singles, and this game proves that. All that praise, not even to mention the soundtrack. Oh my god, the soundtrack for this game is second to none. It is truly a masterclass front to back, and I have not enough good things to say about it. Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness might not be a perfect game, but it may just be the best Pokemon game you've never played, and I highly recommend you do so. Thank you so much for watching, and if you made it this far in the video, again, I can't thank you enough. Let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments. Let me know if you played it, if you're going to play it, and if you enjoyed the video, a like or a sub would go a long way in pushing me to make more content like this. I hope you all have an amazing day. Peace out.